and welcome to Katie's English Lessons. I'm Katie and today we're talking about one of the most interesting words in English because it has so many grammatical meanings. And what would you say if you hear, would you like a cup of tea? I would play dolls every evening. My laptop wouldn't work. He thought he would pass his exam. She said she would be on time. If it didn't rain, we would go outside. I wish he wouldn't tell lies. If only they wouldn't speak so loud. I would have studied medicine, but I chose law. And as you can see, in every sentence there is the verb would, but in each case it has a different meaning. And it's essential to understand the meaning. That's why let's talk about the verb would today and its multiple meanings. And I'd rather you stayed and learned these meanings. Let's go. The verb would is a modal verb and is the past form of the verb will. And as any other modal verbs, it doesn't require any auxiliary verbs and is always followed by bare infinitives. In other words, infinitives without particle to. For instance, I would stay. Would you go? I wouldn't do that. And now let's talk about the meanings. The modal verb would can be used in polite requests and offers. And here we can use the construction would like. By the way, this construction is followed by infinitive. And we say, would you like to do something or would you like something? For instance, would you like to go with me? Would you like some tea? Would you like to try on a new dress? Or as a statement, we can say, I would like. And these phrases are much more polite and better than just phrases, do you want or I want. I would like some tea. And you sound very polite. Another way of making requests, and even in a more polite form, is to use a construction, would you mind doing something? And please note, here we use a gerund phrase, notion verb in ing form. And we can use this construction when we ask for some help. Would you mind taking out the trash? Would you mind closing the door? Would you mind turning off your music? And it sounds very polite. Another way of making requests is just to use the verb would. Would you give me your pen, please? Would you send me a letter? We can also use will here. Will you send me a letter? Will you lend me a hand? But it is informal and doesn't sound polite. Better say would. Would you lend me a hand? Would you help me? Would you tell me the time? You can also use this construction at the end and say, tell me the time. Would you? Another phrase that we can use when we offer something to somebody is would you care? Would you care to do something? Or would you care for something? And this phrase is usually used when we want to offer some treats or some drinks to somebody. Would you care for some tea? Would you care for some ice cream? In other words, would you like? And in colloquial speech, it's possible to omit would and just say care for some tea. Number 2, we usually use would to speak about past habits or past actions. So the things that you usually did in the past but don't do anymore. I would play dolls every evening. I would take my sister to the kindergarten. I don't do it now, she's a grown-up. I would swim in the river with my granddad. And here the verb would has the same meaning as the construction used to do something. And we can say, I would ride my bike every day, or I used to ride my bike every day. But please note that would we use only for actions, only for activities. If you are talking about states or situations, you can only use the form used to. And that's why we can only say, I used to be shy when I was a kid. It's not right to say would here. We can only say used to. He's so fit now, but he used to be quite fat. For example, it's correct to say, I used to live in a village, but not would. I used to like ice cream, but for example, I don't like it anymore. Again, only used to, not would. Number 3, would is used with past refusals. For example, if you have a present situation and something that's happening in present, you can say, he calls her, but she won't reply. But when we are talking about the past, we can say, he called her, but she wouldn't reply. In other words, she didn't reply. He saw she had been crying, but she wouldn't tell why. She refused to tell why. I asked him many questions, but he wouldn't reply. So he didn't reply, he refused to give me replies. Also, we can use this phrase when we talk about different machines, computers, cars, laptops, and so on and so forth. I wanted to come on time to work, but my car wouldn't start. I tried to show him the file, but it wouldn't open. I tried to finish the report on time, but my laptop wouldn't work. In other words, it didn't work. Case number 4, and again, here we're talking about the past, because it is future relative to the past, or in other words, future in the past. Again, there can be a present situation where you need to use the verb will. He thinks he will pass his exam. And now imagine that it was in the past and it was a year ago. In this case, we need to use the past form and say, he thought he would pass his exam. She promised she would come on time. And here we're using the sequence of tenses rule, and if the verb in the main clause is in the past tense, the verb in the subordinate clause must be used in one of the past tenses as well. For instance, she believed he would call. In the main clause we say believed, the past simple tense. That's why in the subordinate clause we will use future in the past. You meet your old friend one day and you say, I was sure we would meet. She knew she would finish the report on time. She knew that in the past. That's why we are using future in the past or would. Number 5, we are using would in direct or reported speech. And again, here we need to use the sequence of tenses. So if we have will in the direct speech, for instance, I will send you a letter, but he said that in the past and we want to report his words, we need to say he said he would send a letter. Again, we're using sequence of tenses. My mom asked, will you come? And now let's report this question and say, my mom asked if I would come. Direct speech, I will go to Paris. She said that she would go to Paris. For instance, direct speech, I won't go to the shop, I'm too tired. Direct speech, she said she wouldn't go to the shop, she was too tired. This topic, direct and indirect speech, is very interesting and quite complicated. I'm going to talk about this in my future class. That's why please subscribe in order not to miss it. And now let's move on and speak about conditionals, because of course verb would is used in conditionals. There are 5 conditionals in total, but the modal verb would is used second, third and mixed conditionals. And if we have an if clause and we're talking about real, future, we need to use conditional 1. And we will say, if the weather is fine, we will go to the beach. And now let's imagine that the situation is unreal because it is raining outside. That's why we need to use conditional 2 and say, if the weather were fine, we would go outside. In if clause, we need to use past simple tense, but in the main clause, would plus bare infinitive. If I had his number, I would call him, but I don't have his number. If she had time, she would lend me a hand, but she doesn't have time. But now let's imagine that we are talking about some unreal situation that was in the past. And here we need to use the third conditional. If he had passed the exam, he would have entered the university. But unfortunately, he didn't pass the exam. If he had arrived earlier, they would have met. But it was too late and he didn't meet her. And as you noticed, in if clause, I'm using past perfect tense, and in the main clause, we use would plus past participle. But I'm going to talk about conditionals in details in my future class, so don't forget to subscribe. And case number 7, and here let's talk about phrases I wish and if only. And if we use would with them, we express our disapproval. We complain about somebody's behavior and we cannot change this behavior, we cannot influence it, but we show our dissatisfaction with the present situation. And we say, I wish you wouldn't cheat so much. I wish you wouldn't tell so many lies. I wish you wouldn't borrow my clothes without asking. So we really complain, we really regret, we really disapprove this behavior. We express our annoyance and impatience. If only you wouldn't smoke in the room. I wish you wouldn't leave your dirty socks on the floor. I wish it would rain. The garden needs some water. She wishes he would work less. I wish he wouldn't drive so fast. Number 8. We use would to sound less direct after such reports as to think, to say, advise, recommend, suggest, suppose. Make your statement less direct and more polite. And we can say, I would advise you to keep on working on your grammar. Or we can shorten it and say, I'd advise you to keep on working on your grammar. I'd imagine it wasn't easy for you. I'd recommend you to try on this size. I'd say you're about 40. I would suggest that you take this route. It's much further than Dublin, I'd think. Also, we can use would in such phrases as would prefer to, would rather, and would sooner. So we use these phrases to say what we prefer to do. And note that after would prefer, we need to use an infinitive, but after would rather or would sooner, we need to use a bare infinitive. For instance, I would rather stay at home. I would rather read a book. But also please note, if there is only one subject in the sentence, we need to use the base form, the bare infinitive, and we will say, I'd rather stay at home. I would rather call him. He would rather be silent. But if there are two subjects and we are talking about different people or about somebody else, we need to use the past simple form. You can compare, I would rather stay at home. I would rather you stayed at home. I'd rather not go out. I'd rather you didn't go out. I'd rather not drink any alcohol today. I'd rather you didn't drink any alcohol today. After the phrase would sooner, we'd also need to use the base form. I don't really want to come back to Germany. I'd sooner go to Paris. The last form for today, and this form is very important. That's when we speak about unreal situations in the past. Something that didn't happen, but these are not conditionals. We don't have here if clause. For instance, he would have studied law, but he chose medicine. Now he's a doctor. She would have worked on the project, but she had to resign. And here we're talking about unreal situations in the past. That's why we use past participle after the verb would. Would have done something. I would have lived in London, but it was too expensive. Here we are, we've discussed 10 situations where we need to use the verb would, and I hope you remember them. So let's recap. First, we use the verb would in polite requests and offers. Number 2, for past actions of past habits. Number 3, for past refusals. Number 4, future in the past. Number 5, in reported speech as the past form of the verb will. Number 6, in conditional sentences. Number 7, after phrases I wish and if only for complaining. Number 8, after reporting verbs to sound less direct. Number 9, in phrases would prefer to, would rather, would sooner. And number 10, for unreal situations in the past. Right, I'd say that it was a lot, but I do hope that you liked this video, and I'd rather you left the comment below and liked this video. And also don't forget to subscribe because there are going to be other videos, and I'd like to see you in class. Bye for now.